She always dressed like this in the very short shorts, which to this day are called Daisy Dukes in her honor.
Hi, I'm George the Antique Nomad. Come with me as I wander the country in search of valuable vintage, amazing antiques, and cool collectibles. We'll buy, sell, and trade at antique malls, shops, and shows, estate sales, flea markets, thrift stores, anywhere people go to find really interesting things that just aren't made anymore. So come on, let's go!
Hello everybody, this is George the Antique Nomad, and this time I'm with you from Paducah, Kentucky. Paducah's got a lot of antiques, vendor malls, thrift stores, and lots to see around here. And it's Sunday morning, so the Traders Mall is open. This is actually an indoor flea market that's only open on the weekends primarily. And we have a chance to take a look in here today. I've got my mask because this place I'm not sure is big enough for social distancing, so I'm going to make sure that we're okay. And we'll have fun together, so let's go. Traders Mall is a place that has a bunch of permanent exhibits of new stuff, used stuff, everything from furniture and mattresses to, I believe someone actually sells little suckling pigs here. So it's a hodgepodge of things, but sometimes there's some vintage stuff that's cool. I bought some neat stuff here before, so we're going to take a look. All right, so like a lot of places like this, again, the first thing you see oftentimes in these sorts of places are the new things. But we're going to turn to the left because I have found stuff down here before. We'll try to go past the new eye candy jewelry and see if we can find some old eye candy. Okay, well now we're getting into an area where we see some at least used goods. I like this little Hazzard stool that is with this sewing machine, but I guess they don't come separately. Take a look over here and see if these dishes, yeah, this is false graph villager pattern from the 1970s. $30 for the set would be fine if you were starting a basic set, but I mainly only sell serving pieces. The old sewing box is cute. This is one that folds out and was probably made in a factory, although a lot of these were handmade too. A lot of guys would make these for their spouses, and I think this actually is handmade the more I look at it. You can see they used a piece of plywood here and old pine board. Kind of neat, it's cute. And people are more interested in sewing than they've been in a long time, but that's priced at $75, which is more than I could get for at retail. Let's see what this floor scale is here. This is Fairbanks. This would have been used probably in a place like a large package delivery or maybe even a railroad terminal. Priced at $175. Again, they say they have the weights, but that to me is full value for something so heavy and big. Lots of tins, the kind of typical forest green Anchor Hawking vases, Rosie O'Grady's. You know, there are some cute little furniture pieces over there, but I've got to be honest, so far all the prices are retail here. There is old stuff hanging on the wall. People like to decorate with farm junk these days, and there are definitely collectors. There are some people who actually buy these. I've sold some of these band saws, for example, this double saw here in front in the blue. I've actually sold those to people who were still using them. Another area people are collecting that they didn't used to are these old chemical sprayers. Used to be people avoided these because the chemical, I think, was new enough that people were afraid of it, but now these are 60 years old and most of them are empty and at this point inert. And there are people who find that rather fascinating. That one's priced at $6. It's not a bad price. Someone would probably pay 10 or 12. Got an old farm plow laying sideways on the floor here. In fact, they have several of these. They're all priced about $50 to $65, and that's about right. That's what people pay to use them as decoration. Now this old press here, this seems to be some sort of an old sausage press. Could also be used to press for juice, I suppose, because it does have an outflow spigot. This is going to date to probably the 1920s or 30s. It's priced at $85. That's really not a bad price. I've seen them sell for double if you get one with all the parts, because there are people who still use these to press things, especially people living out in the country. People still use this stuff if they're not in the city. The old Mayfield milk can is $50. I remember when those sold for about 25 to 30, but they've really become harder to find and more popular now. These old cast iron wheels are things people use at the fronts of driveways or in fence railing and all that sort of thing. $75 each is about the going rate. These old spoke wheels are going to be from a 1920s vintage car. They're priced at $35 each. It's not actually a terrible price for them. And you have a bunch of other industrial and farm wheels in the $40, $50, $65 range. There's a big hay hook, $95. That's pretty cool. And the classic horse collar, one on the left that's just the way it was, and one on the right made into a mirror. In the 1970s, it became really popular when people, especially the hippie generation, started to grow up, and they were looking to repurpose and reuse, and they were also interested in things that sort of cast off the trappings of city life, and so a lot of these got readapted into mirrors at that point. This one's priced at $85. That seems to be about the going rate these days. So I'm finding fun old farm stuff here today, but I don't see a lot of individual vendors with old things. Sometimes you get people who set up outside. We don't seem to have that today. I think people are laying a little bit low right now. Figured I'd better show some of these beer signs too. The Coors with the clock that has a stopwatch, apparently, counting up. That is $65. You've got this Schlitz light for $85 and the Coors for $75 and the Schlitz below for $40. These signs are starting to sell in these price ranges. I remember when these were considered the cheap stuff and everyone wanted neon, but the neon's pretty much all gone, so now there's a lot of interest in these. We'll look real quickly at a few of these as well. These are kerosene lamps, and the one I want to show you is the one with the replaced Aladdin shade. You can tell because it has the new Aladdin logo rather than the old one, but at least they put the Aladdin on there because this was the Aladdin Lincoln drape pattern. Lincoln drape, I believe, because of the draperies over his casket when he was assassinated. The Lincoln drape is one of many different patterns in old kerosene lanterns, and the patterns really have a lot to do with the value. Now this one's priced at $125. In the days of yore, 30 years ago, that might have been a price it would sell for. Nowadays, they don't usually go as high as that unless they have color, but certain patterns are rare, so it pays to do a little research if you see these. You can sometimes find a bargain. And then somebody in the 70s, instead of returning their Coke bottle for deposit, made a lamp out of it. That's kind of cute. $40 they've got on that. Another popular collector thing in the 70s was to mount old tools on boards as a display. You've got a bunch of wrenches in the middle. Some of those might be the old Ford. They've got interesting writing in the handles and embossing. And they've got these priced at $65 each. Another thing was popular in that time was to mount barbed wire. These are interesting because they show all the different kinds of barbs, and you can get a pretty good view. The people who put these displays together in the 60s and 70s really went deeply into studying these things and the dates that they were invented. So this actually is a good history of barbed wire and all the different kinds right there. And you can see barbed wire came out as early as the 1700s. It was one of the first things made because obviously when we started to segment the ranch land and people started wanting their own little piece of it, well, you had to wire it up to keep the cattle in, so. It's a fun display. They have $125 on that. I have to be honest, I've never seen one priced less. It just seems to be that that's what they go for. One more beer sign we see here, and again, it's priced at $65. I have to say, everything I've seen here today has been retail price, but it's cool. It's a barrel end, and this one is for Pabst. A lot of different companies did these. Again, about 1980 is when you see these made, and they are collectible now. Well, one thing with flea markets is you never know what you'll find, and some days you do and some days you don't. There weren't a lot of outdoor vendors, and the gal that I really get cool stuff from wasn't here this week, so kind of struck out on this one, but I'll come back because I have found good stuff here before. And now we're going to go on to a really special store in Paducah. The folks who have Fatbird Finds channel, Laura and Mary Beth. Well, Laura's mother has a shop called Lamon's here in Paducah, and we're going to go look at it. So my next stop is a place I haven't been before. It's Lamon's Antiques, and it is in an obscure little neighborhood on South 6th Street in Paducah, but it is packed with some really cool stuff. Fatbird Finds did a video on this because Laura of Fatbird Finds, this is her mother's shop, this is how she got interested in antiques and vintage. But I thought that it was so nice what I saw there that I should share it with my subscribers too. So we're going to go in and take a little look. So walking in the door, one of the first things we see is a really great old oak store display cabinet. And you can see that it would have been from a general store because they have everything in here from lump borax, headache powder, cough drops, to mothballs, Seidlitz pea. Okay, I'm not a pharmacist, so I don't know what that was. Shaving mugs, cloth brushes. This is really cool. This is something special. We don't see a lot of these left in existence that haven't already been claimed and put into homes. But if that's too big for you, then we have several doll-sized pieces of furniture, and aren't those cute? Look at the mirror in the one on the right. People always are saying these are salesman samples, and that may or may not be true. I would think if anything it might be the piano. Salesman samples generally were very specific with lots of features that you would see in a real piece, whereas these I think were made as items for girls to play with. This stand here with the porcelain with the claws, that is really neat too. This place is a very nice old line antique shop with real stuff, and we're going to have fun looking around at it. Now this is a furniture heavy store because they do promote themselves as a furniture store, but obviously it is towards the traditional and the antique. Look at the lovely portrait of the woman here with the craquelure. I actually like crackling on paintings when it comes to portraits and things, and it just gives it more of an aged look, and that may actually indicate that it was stored in a place that didn't have good central air, but you know, a lot of these pieces predate central air, which was not really a thing in most houses until after the Second World War. Neat old Georgian silver-plated lamp, that's Edward & Sons out of Glasgow, Scotland, and I like the column pillar. And then you've got an old regulator clock, and that one says that it chimes with the press carved grape at the top. There's a corner cabinet. People like corner cabinets because they give you a lot of extra space, and a lot of them are handmade because they were made to fit a particular corner. I believe this one was because look how the interior panels are all a little different from each other. So I don't think this was a piece that was done in a factory. I think this was done by someone for their particular place. It has nice detail. And the table is set in a very tasteful, handsome way with Castleton rose china and Fostoria rose point, which is a wonderful old pattern that you don't see a whole lot anymore. Interestingly enough, the rose point seems to have etching around the top edge. I don't remember that about it, but it's been a while since I was an elegant depression glass dealer. That used to be a big specialty of mine, but now I deal in all sorts of things. This screen with the chinoiserie is very pretty. I love the color of blue. It looks like that's actually screen printed, but that still would date to sometime around the very first couple of decades of the 1900s. Interestingly enough, people are already finding things in here at prices they can buy for resale. So again, you go into these little shops and they look fancy and formal and they have nice things. They just sold an R.J. Horner bedroom set yesterday for $5,000 here that was a French Renaissance displayed at the World's Fair. You can see that in the Fatbird's Finds video on this store. But someone else just found a wonderful printed tin box from about 1910 and it was only $5. So you always pays to look in these stores. Resellers can buy things from other antique dealers. This postcard set framed is all New Orleans. I have a friend who's a big New Orleans fan. She would love that. Over here we have the classic covered Wagon TV lamp. This one's a handmade one from the 50s. there were handmade and commercial ones, and generally the way they work, this one I don't think is plugged in, but you would press this tong and that would actually turn the light on and off. This shop just has a lot of really beautiful and interesting items. This fireplace screen is sweet with the embroidery on it. You can get a better look at the detail there. Priced about $150. If you remember the expression, mind your beeswax, well, early makeup, and there was makeup in the Victorian era, there was a period where it was considered unseemly, but there was a period before that where makeup was widely used. You can think of the French courtesans, for example. And beeswax was a primary base for it. And so if you weren't careful and you got too close to the flame or out in the heat, it would start to run because it would melt. So that's where mind your beeswax came from, and those screens were to help you keep your beeswax on your face. A very handsome English print at the top, the Melton breakfast with all the red coats. And then the fox hunt scene. Fox hunting is something that's no longer really done in England, but it was a major sport amongst the wealthy and upper class for many, many centuries. And this has Sir Richard Sutton and the Queen... Oh, I'm sorry. Sir Richard Sutton and the Corn Hounds. And they're all getting ready to go out on the fox hunt. There are people who collect fox hunting things. Here is another embroidered fireplace screen. You could raise and lower that screen so that it would block your face.
Oh, so this is a fireplace?
So this is a French set of twin beds, and it's got the nightstand with the florals. It's got the magazine rack even down there that goes with it, and here are the twin beds. Really beautiful set.
I didn't know that.
There's their side rails. Now, a lot of times you can put twin beds together and make a big enough space to put a queen or a king, which people like nowadays. These, I think, because of the curvature, might be difficult. You might have to have them customized a little bit for that. They're priced at $295 for the beds. Here we've got a nice case full of Flow blue, again a corner case, and we see some really nice Victorian Flow blue. The centerpiece is actually German with the leaves and reticulation. And then we have this piece, which is English. Most of the early Flow blue was English. It was considered a factory second by the English, but Americans just loved it because they sent all their factory seconds here, so we collect it and they do not. Handsome parquetry table here with the block pattern. I like the way they have it set at the angle so that when you see it, it gives it more of a dimension. I always like these tables because if you were into Art Deco, for example, you could mix something like this in and the geometry would be enough for it to carry into a different type of setting than you might imagine just looking at it the way it's presented here. And this makes me very happy to see something in a wonderful high-end store like this that actually came from me. They purchased this from me yesterday, and that is just such a sweet little painting. Labarge mirror with carved fruit. The Labarge mirrors are very valuable. They were very popular, I believe, in the mid-20th century, but they had a very beautiful deep carved applied fruit and flowers aspect to them that has made them very popular. And you can see on the back that it has Labarge, High Point, North Carolina on the label. So that tells you that it's not a Victorian mirror, but it sure would look great in that kind of a house. Or really a lot of houses. You know, again, a lot of modernists are starting to realize that just having boxy is not so much fun, and that you need to spice it up with an accent. And sometimes people will take something like this that isn't specifically antique looking but has a more antique aspect and put it in as a color spot or a visual place that really kind of livens up a room. So my friend Jeffrey from Real Nifty Vintage just picked this print up and asked me about it, and it is a Maxfield Parish. And it has the name printed on the lower left side, which is a little obscure for me to read, but it was done in 1925. It's a very classical, famous piece by him. And it's $22, and I think I'm going to buy it because I have collectors for these, and I just think they're beautiful. Look at the depth and the color. Look at the mountains in the background, all the shading. This one's sweet because it's a mother with child. They're usually more Grecian women looking very sensual, and this one is actually more of a sweet form. And what a beautiful setting. So that's going to have to come home with me.
So while I'm thinking of it, please comment in the space below here and also hit the thumbs up button to like this video. If you haven't subscribed, click the subscribe button below. Also hit the bell below to be notified of new videos coming every Monday and Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And thank you so much for following along. Let's go back to this video.
So here we are in downtown Paducah, and in these beautiful old buildings, the Wagon building that you see there, they are the home, or actually next door is the home of Paducah Antique Mall, and that's our next stop. And you see the gang of 5 before me there, and we have another guest who is with us, and that is Xenomorph, who has come out, my moderator, tech guy, and all around friendly troll, yes. So Paducah Antique Mall has a wonderful painting of Chief Paducah, for whom Paducah is named. This used to be Bright's. Here in the front window is an Edward Woodard fiberglass set.
Now that we're starting to do this, we probably will know.
And Woodard was a big designer of patio furniture in the 1960s. And this particular set is something that we see in Florida a lot. They usually came white. I believe this has been repainted. They're just fiberglass strands all put together, but they make a very strong, sturdy, lightweight, and weather-resistant outdoor set. And they have this priced at $350, which is about right. People have discovered these again. They are popular now. This antique mall is like a lot that we see in old downtowns, where you take a skinny long store that's obsolete for its original purpose, and you make spaces on the outside and down the middle and a racetrack, and it gives you a place to put a lot of cool merchandise in a small space. Something we see right off the bat for you uranium glass lovers is this. This was a stand for tea-berry gum. These were done around 1920, and they wanted that bright color to attract your attention on the counter, so they put uranium in it as uranium oxide, and that makes it glow under a black light like crazy. By the way, my friend Patrick at Trusty Huckster Mercantile is doing a deeper dive, and by the time this comes out, it'll be something you can see archivally, and they're going to talk with, over the years, Tim knows all about uranium glass. He's going to give a big treatise on it so that you can all learn why it's made, what to look for, and what's cool about it. It is so amazing under a black light. Here's the Rolling Stones Some Girls album from 1977, and the thing that is good about this one is it's got the inserts. The cover is an old print of one of these 1960s wig advertisements, and then they put all of these faces in it. Some of those are members of the Rolling Stones, and some of them are other people, mostly men. It was considered kind of far out in 1977. And the thing is that this album with it three-dimensional like this is worth $10 because of the three-dimensional cover. The flat cover that they printed as a discount album at that time is worth much less. This blue spattered vase is Rumrill with the incised mark. I believe that this one was made by the Red Wing Pottery Company for Rumrill. They had Red Wing and Shawnee make items for them in the 1930s. I believe the guy's name was George Rumrill. Mr. Rumrill was a person who was a jobber. In other words, he went store to store stocking and selling and promoting the sale of items wholesale to stores, and he got a lot of requests for pottery, especially in the late 30s. This is around 1938. We had cut off relations with Japan and Germany at that point because of things happening regarding the war, and all of a sudden there was a shortage of ceramics and artware and things for people's homes. So the jobbers were being asked, could you get us more ceramics? So he decided to get a deal with those pottery companies and have lines made with his name on them. And it went on for a period of, I believe, 5 or 7 years, and they are collectible because of his name. These are cute. These are Dutch salt and pepper shakers, and they're fairly crudely painted. They were made in Japan. What's interesting is we always say that things in the 30s said made in Japan and things in the 50s said just Japan, but this one didn't get the whole made in mark on it because of the space, but it does have the 1933 Chicago World's Fair. Actually, I think it's 34 because that fair ran 2 years. It's got the 34 Chicago label, so just remember every rule we tell you, there can be exceptions. So even though those don't say made in Japan, they are indeed from the 1930s, and it just had to do with the fact that the mark wouldn't fit in that little tiny space. Well, now that social distancing has made it undesirable to touch each other, you can use this, and you can touch things from a distance. This is dated May 1999, which doesn't seem that old, but this is right when the last of the rubber glove makers are leaving the United States, and so we see a lot of these now. These would have been on a big spindle that would go around through a vat full of latex, and it would dry, and that would be a rubber glove. It'd be peeled off, inspected, and then it goes back into the vat to make more. People are buying these now to use them for everything from oddities, decoration, to jewelry displays. Lots of compacts. There are all sorts from the 1950s and early 60s. This is right about the end of people buying compacts. Then they became just sort of a toss-away thing that was pre-filled by a company, which was called commercial compacts. These would have been decorative, where you put your own things in them. We are in the part of the country where the Dukes of Hazzard were very popular. Actually, they were very popular all over. And AMT made a model of Daisy's Jeep CJ. Daisy Duke really helped kick off the popularity of the CJ, so much so that a couple years later in 1981, during the show's run, they had a recall because the wheelbase wasn't long enough and they felt that it was causing them to tip over, and Jeep actually invested in redoing it rather than discontinuing it because it was so popular because of the show. And then the Wranglers really took off in the early 90s. I drove one for a long time and loved the thing. Anyway, of course, Daisy Duke, her big claim to fame is that even though she only had about 5 minutes of airtime on every show, she always dressed like this in the very short shorts, which to this day are called Daisy Dukes in her honor. She's actually got a little store in Nashville where they have a big collection of stuff from the show, including this Jeep that she drove. If you were around in the 70s, if your parents let you be wild, you were probably a Kiss fan. And if your parents didn't let you be wild, you were probably a Donnie and Marie fan. And here we have both. Goes to show you that Wild sells for more in the long run because Paul Stanley is $70 and Donny Osmond is only $30. But they both have the same sort of splashy jumpsuits. It's so funny that that was the style back then. Can you imagine someone came dressed like that now? These chalkware cowboy lamps are really cool. You've got the cowboy and the cowgirl on the rearing horses. They've got the original shades, which is important. These are going to be 1950s from when Western was everything. And they are expensive. I think they're $3 1/4, but they're also very hard to find because they mainly were in kids' rooms and they mainly got destroyed. Another 70s icon, Jamie Summers, the Bionic Woman. And there she is, original in the box. She even still has the cellophane on, which is why it looks like she's got a lens over one eye like a monocle, but that's actually just the original cellophane. More cool toys. This dealer has a lot of good stuff. He's got the Sew Master sewing machine. $60 is about the right price on the blue with the transferware in good condition. The Daniel Boone lunchbox, that would have been especially popular here in Kentucky because Daniel Boone came here as a pioneer. The Tonka bulldozer in the original box. The original boxes are not something commonly found on toys before the 1980s. In the 1980s, everybody started collecting old toys, wishing they'd kept the boxes, and so starting in the 80s, everybody keeps the boxes for everything, and it's not a big deal anymore. Here's Roy Rogers and Dale Evans. The original lunch boxes from the 50s were different shape, a little thinner than the later ones, and definitely heavier gauge steel than the reproductions that followed later. And then if you're old enough to remember when radio shows gave out secret messages, you had to have a decoder. So you had the Captain Midnight decoder if you were listening to Captain Midnight on the radio, and you'd have to turn the dial to figure out what the secret code was. They'd give you a different one every week, I believe. Here's a nice set of dealer promotional cars, and there's some different varieties here. Not just different models, but different for different reasons. A lot of the earlier ones were actually metal. This is a 1950 Chevrolet, and on top, the lettering, it may be hard to read, but it says Falcon Gray. So that was actually telling you what color you were getting. Next to it, we have a 1965 Rambler Classic, and it's got a broken bumper. This was a problem. These were usually given to kids to play with while mom and dad looked at the real car, and kids played with them hard, so finding them in good condition is difficult. Next to that, a 66 Chevy Impala Super Sport. The 66 and 7 Impalas were just about the most popular single model of car ever made. They made 1 million of them in 1967 for just one model. And then this one is a Ford T-Bird from 1966, and this one has a friction drive. So you would actually roll it backwards, and that would make the friction motor wind up, and then you'd set it down and it would roll forwards. Not all of the promotional cars had that, so that makes them a little more desirable. Prices on these are between $45 and $80, and they really do sell for those prices. The owner of the store is very sweet and runs a good store, and she likes to try to get people with a lot of different items. She actually has another building where she puts more antique items if you're looking for marble top Victorian and that sort of thing. But here she's got a dealer with mid-century modern. This is a nice little bar cart from about 1970, and it's got the masonite levels, and it's also got this bottle holder. It's priced at $75, which is really pretty good for what it is. A lot of utility, and as a dealer I could put it up on a table and use it as a display, so that is tempting. There's also a very groovy amber pole lamp for $85, and that wonderful gold Hollywood Regency style piece on the back wall is also lighting, and I think that's priced at $185. But it's certainly showy. This is a neat booth. This is a clock specialist, and he apparently has hundreds of clocks at home, and he does restoration and repair as well, which is a good thing to know because these days there are fewer and fewer clock makers. There's still a few clock and watch repair schools, but they're only graduating half a dozen or so graduates per year these days. It used to be that there were hundreds who would graduate every year because there was such demand for this. This is a nice Mission clock, priced at $165, going to date to about 1910. A lot of the ones that look like that were actually given as prizes for people selling newspapers back then. This is a fusee, which is a different kind of movement that predates the movements that we're used to now. Fusee movements make things more valuable, late 1800s. Cuckoo clock. It's nice to buy a cuckoo clock that you see running because those movements tended to break very easily. And then of course I'm always a fan of these golden hour clocks. This one's in working order for $95. He's got a very nice Bun Special 21 jewel Illinois pocket watch here. I wish I could bring it in a little closer for you to see. Let's see if I can. This is actually a very good movement, and that's why it's priced at $475. I had one once and I did get $475 for it. It's adjustable to various positions, meaning any way you held it, it would keep running. That was very important to prevent accidents. That's why they're called railroad watches, because the railroads demanded them after a terrible accident in the 1870s where a few hundred people died on a train because it crashed into another train because the switchman threw the switch at the wrong time. So then they perfected the pocket watch. as a railroad watch. This one is South Bend from South Bend, Indiana. The Studebaker Car Company owned the South Bend Watch Company for a while, and so you'd see Studebaker marked watches in the 1920s as well. They're also harder to find, that's why that's priced at $425. Then you've got these little travel alarm clocks, like this Linden with the patriotic look. This is only priced at $25. This would have been made in Germany, but for the American market about 1976 for the bicentennial, and people are starting to collect little travel clocks. $25 is about the going rate on most of them. He's also got a lot of men's wrist watches and some children's watches. Children's watches are another thing like the Raggedy Ann right below us that got lost or broken, and they had very inexpensive movements because they figured your kid was going to break it or outgrow it, so they didn't put a good movement in those. So finding them in working order is not so easy. And one last one I want to show is this. This is the West clock. This is the Moon Glow, and it was developed in the late 30s and very extensively used during the Second World War when both men and women were having to go to work, because it can be set so that the alarm will make a glowing light come on and then a sound alarm later, so you could set it for 2 different times, and that way 2 different people in the same house could use the alarm at the same time. And then one other thing we find interest in are interval timers, or timers of any sort, but this one is nice because it's got its original GE X-Ray Corporation box, and this is going to be from the 1930s in a nice Bakelite case. It's priced at $45. They're really handsome. You know, I know everybody's using phones and devices for time, but these really are fun, and every house should have one clock. I mean, I don't know why I say that, but it just seems like something comforting, and it's also easier to not always have to turn the phone on or switch off stuff. I don't know, I still like clocks. What can I say? Oh, and one more of the mystery dial. This one is by Haddon. It's a little different than the Jefferson, but they did the same kind of thing, where it's the invisible hands, because it's actually the motor is here and then the outer is where the movement is. This one's only priced at $65 and it has its original box. So walking out the door here, I noticed that there are, we'll have to come back when they're open, but Creatures of Habit, which has vintage clothing and other vintage stuff. And upstairs from them, if we can see it, in the top window of this old building, I don't know how well that'll show, but there is an old neon Buster Brown shoe store sign from about 1945, and that is something that would be worth several $100s if it was for sale, which I'm sure it's not. Then next door, Encore Consignment Shop. So there's going to be more filming in Paducah soon. Well, we had a lot of fun at these various haunts in Paducah, and I've got one more video coming up to show you with the gang. We went to a big vendor mall called The Shed, which is sort of a hybrid of antiques and other things in one location, and it's a great place to shop. We had a lot of fun there too. So we'll see you with that in our next episode. Meanwhile, this is George the Antique Nomad on Periscope, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and here on YouTube on Mondays and Wednesdays, and it's great to see you. We'll see you soon from the world of antiquing. Bye-bye now.
Thanks for joining me again in the fun and fascinating antique community here where online meets the real world. Please click the subscribe button below, click the bell to be notified when new videos upload, leave a comment below, and hit thumbs up to like this video. Links to our online social media daily posts and our items for sale are in the description. This is George at the Antique Nomad. Bye for now.